The term YIMBY, an acronym for Yes in My Backyard, contrasts with NIMBY, or Not in My Backyard. The YIMBY movement advocates for a pro-development approach.
I'll fight efforts that prevent having the capacity that we need. I'll fight efforts that create intergenerational inequity, where one generation gets to say, I got mine, you get yours.
So that's why state action and strong state standards are so incredibly important.
By many measures, housing affordability issues got so much worse over the last 2 or 3 years. Rents in so many cities skyrocketed, home prices skyrocketed, rental vacancies are at completely untenable rates. But in another sense, this is the best possible time for our movement.
We have a pretty significant vote potentially today on our Arizona Starter Homes Act. So we had a big vote on it.
Our mission is to keep the spirit of the Western frontier alive in Montana. And for us, that means keeping Montanans free to build, create, and innovate. And for us, that means whether we're talking big scale, creating really big projects, or doing something really small, like creating an ADU. And so that's the perspective that we bring to this conversation.
YIMBY Town is an annual gathering of activists and policymakers from various government levels who support the Yes in My Backyard, or YIMBY movement.
It's just a total conversation change of our zone changes now, when we don't have to look at what's been sort of a de facto color on the map for so long. It really does change the conversation, and I would invite any of you to take a look at our website at Imagine Lexington and take a look at what we did in place of a future land use map. It's not the only way to do it, but it's the way we chose to do it, and it's been really good at helping get better development. And we haven't had one single planning recommendation for conditional zoning to limit density since we did that.
Most of what we regulate, though, when it comes to regulations, most of what we regulate is how a development addresses our pedestrian realm. Sidewalk requirements, driveway widths, sometimes it includes traffic analysis, but usually that's handled by Public Works, and it's actually less common than you'd know about, than you think about. But mostly what we care about is how you address our public realm. And so when you connect to the streets or the sidewalks, what are you doing?
You can have state preemption in different contexts with different political realities. The lens and the framing just changes, and maybe it's a little bit more of a sort of like deregulatory type of environment. That's fine. But as long as it gets to the right outcomes, to me, that's the goal.
Some criticize the YIMBY movement's dual strategy of promoting private property rights and social equity. However, this bipartisan method has advanced progressive reforms more effectively than any other approach in housing advocacy.
In fact, what we see out there and what we have seen for the last few years is more and more people, including in places like my hometown of San Antonio, certainly here in Austin, paying not 33%, but 40%, 50%, 60% of their income in rent, leaving less and less for everything else. So we need, in many places, more willingness among colleagues on city councils to be able to jump over things like council courtesy and other practices that sometimes stand in the way of creating the path for more housing opportunity.
We haven't seen a large state grow this fast since California in the early 20th and mid 20th century, and we do kind of know how that story turned out. Not so well. We want to keep Texas growing as fast as it's growing and make sure that it eventually becomes the biggest state in the union, which is not an implausible outcome over the next 30 years. Obviously, land use and housing is the #1 issue there. If you look at the history of Texas housing prices relative to income, they were really steady when the rest of the US exploded in the 2000 and 2006 era. The median house price to median income ratio in Texas was pretty stable. It took about a 3 years income to buy a house in Texas, even through the housing boom of the early 2000s. When did you see it really start exploding in Texas? Post 2014.
You get both sides of the aisle wanting to address it. Maybe one is, I want justice in order to make sure that this community is not displaced and that they have affordable housing to live. And then you have this other side that says, maybe I'm not necessarily motivated so much by that. I just want private property rights and I just want free market. And they align. And then you make things happen and you get bipartisan solutions. So, we chuckle, we have different views of government, but sometimes we arrive at the same conclusion in the same policy because politics is overshoot.
In Montana, YIMBY advocacy led to reforms that increased housing flexibility by eliminating single-family zoning and permitting ADUs or additional dwelling units on any residential property.
And if we can figure out how to make construction more productive, then we can figure out how to make all of the new stuff that we build a little bit cheaper or a little bit better for the same amount of money, right? So this is a clear win-win, and we should find some of those and line up behind them.
In Arizona, YIMBY's helped eliminate obligatory HOA or homeowners association membership. These anti-exclusionary initiatives transform urban and suburban areas into more inclusive communities for all.
In the coming months, we're going to be tackling an expansive list of transit-supportive policies that will help Austin achieve its affordability, its climate goals, its equity, and livability. We're going to do this while also ensuring our continued economic success. These reforms include reducing compatibility standards throughout the city and lowering the minimum lot size for single-family.